When I first started mixing music, some of the first info I came across was about frequency ranges. For example, I was told 100 Hz to 400 Hz is responsible for fullness when it's balanced, or muddiness when it's too aggressive, etc. Now that's an okay way to think about the frequency spectrum, but it's definitely oversimplified, which often leads to misunderstandings and generalizations that make mixing more difficult, especially when we're dealing with individual tracks. Now, once I started to think about frequencies in the way that I'm about to describe, my mixes drastically improved, and I could mix significantly faster. So, I've experienced firsthand that once you know this, mixing music is so much easier. Starting off, let's discuss a more logical way to divide the frequency response. So, the most popular way to conceptualize a frequency response is as the sub, low, low mid, mid, high, and air ranges. But these ranges are definitely too broad to accurately pinpoint frequencies. As a result, some engineers divide these ranges even further in the hopes of making this idea more useful, but then it just becomes kind of convoluted. And to make everything more frustrating, subjective terms like warm, muddy, thin, clean, boomy, etc. are used as descriptors for each range. So, do me a favor and put that idea aside for right now so that we can start from scratch. The frequency response of an individual instrument or a vocal could be divided into 4 parts. First, the fundamental frequency. Second, harmonious overtones. Third, disharmonious overtones. And fourth, the unmusical or unrelated. So, let's look at an example. Say I pluck a bass guitar and I play the note A1. The fundamental, the foundation of the note A1, is 55 Hz. Notice the high amplitude signal at 55 Hz, and notice how it's the highest amplitude frequency in the overall frequency response. The fundamental frequency is just that, one frequency. It can of course have some modulation above and below, but the fundamental is centered on a single frequency. So this is part 1. It's a simple, single frequency building block of the overall frequency response. Moving on to part 2, we have all harmonious overtones. So all harmonious overtones are created from the fundamental. What does this mean exactly? Well, it means that multiples of this fundamental frequency are generated from the fundamental. These are often called harmonics. The first order harmonic is the fundamental. In our example, 55 Hz. The second order harmonic is 110 Hz, or 55 Hz times 2. The third order harmonic is 165 Hz, or 55 Hz times 3. Now, the amplitude of harmonics generally decreases the further away they are from the fundamental. Just as importantly, all of these harmonics will sound musical because they are direct multiples of the fundamental. For example, the second order harmonic in this example is 110 Hz, or A2, which is 1 octave higher than A1. Part 3 includes disharmonious overtones. As the name suggests, this includes all overtones that are not multiples of the fundamental frequency. Sticking with the example of our plucked bass note, this mainly includes the percussive snap of the string. It could also include scraping of the finger on the fretboard. Furthermore, the bass guitar's body could resonate at a frequency other than A1 or a multiple of A1. So, it's every part of the instrument's sound that still relates to the performance, but it isn't a multiple of the fundamental frequency. And lastly, part 4 is the unmusical and the unrelated. This includes rumble, which could have been caused if our bass guitar was accidentally hit against something, or hum, which could occur from a ground loop, causing unwanted feedback. Now, you can't always separate these unmusical and unrelated elements from a performance, but some useful changes can be made, which we'll cover in just a moment. Now, already, we can see how thinking of the frequency response in this way dramatically narrows the potential frequencies that we need to affect. If the bass guitar plays the notes A1 and E1, I know that the fundamental frequencies are 55 Hz and 82.5 Hz. Instead of a low range that spans hundreds of frequencies, I now have 2 exact frequencies that comprise the bass guitar's lows. Furthermore, I know the exact frequencies of high amplitude harmonics, like 110 Hz and 165 Hz for the A note, or 165 Hz and 248 Hz for the E note, meaning I know exactly where to center a bell if I want to affect that area, or I know the exact range of frequencies to affect if I want to use broader and fewer filters. So next up, let's see how this idea is put into practice, using a more complex signal like a vocal in which multiple notes are being sung. If I were using the more familiar and common idea of frequency ranges, I'd introduce a high-pass filter and set it somewhere in the low range without much of an idea as to why. But now that I know how the fundamental is the building block for the note, I can set the high-pass filter to right below the lowest frequency fundamental. As the singer transitions from note to note, we can observe how the fundamental transitions in tandem. By determining the lowest sung note, I could find the lowest frequency fundamental, meaning I can be confident that my high-pass filter is attenuating only the unmusical and unrelated information that exists below the musical performance. Now, if the lows are too high in amplitude, it's not a predetermined frequency range, but the fundamental and the second and or third ordered harmonics that are causing this issue. So I know exactly where to cut with bell filters, or I can create a higher bandwidth filter to address all of the second and third order harmonics of the collective performance. Furthermore, if I notice this issue when a particular note is sung, I could center a bell on the exact harmonic that's causing the issue. For example, if the lows are too high in amplitude, whenever the note A2 is sung, I know the problem frequency is 110 Hz, 220 Hz, and perhaps 330 Hz. If I were trying to fix this issue using predetermined EQ ranges, like what's typically taught, I'd probably resort to using a dynamic filter to attenuate only when the range hits a particular amplitude. But now, I know the exact frequencies that need to be attenuated, so I just need a couple of subtle bell filters. Or, say I'm having trouble discerning what the vocalist is saying. I could find a multiple of the fundamental or fundamentals around the vocal's third formant and boost to help with intelligibility. Now I could blindly boost a high mid-range and hope that it works, or I could pinpoint the exact frequency that needs to be addressed and center my bell filter on it. If the vocal sounds nasally, I know this is caused by a higher order harmonic mixed with nasal cavity resonation. So again, I can pinpoint the exact offending frequencies by using a multiple of the relevant fundamental frequency. Now the only way to address part 4, or the unmusical and unrelated, is with a high-pass filter when using EQ. That said, more specific processors are needed to remove hum, buzz, etc., and ideally, this is minimized during tracking. And this just leaves us with the disharmonious overtones that don't adhere to a strict structure. For example, vocal sibilance, the snap of a snare or percussive instrument, and so on. So, instead of having 6 to 12 ranges that might be relevant or might not, we have a system for addressing the majority of exact frequencies and exact frequency ranges. The only remaining variable that may require more trial and error is disharmonious overtones. Now maybe this seems complicated, but thinking this way and getting accustomed to it has cut my mix time in half. And this video doesn't even address how knowing this helps with compression and saturation, both of which generate harmonics, let alone arrangement when recording instruments. So the more you move away from the antiquated and oversimplified idea of this range is responsible for this, and begin understanding the frequency structure of an instrument or vocal, the easier mixing becomes.